Hi, everybody. I'm Carolyn Hymas. I'm the Associate Director of Alumnix and Family Engagement. And we had a little mix-up with our webinar link. So we just got the right one sent out. So there'll probably be folks joining us a little bit late. But we're going to go ahead and get started because we have a recording going of the talk. And if anybody misses any parts, they can catch up with the recording. So I would like to take just a few minutes. We have our talk today, how to organize and manage your finances as a creative, with our guest presenter, Claire Van Holland. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please go ahead and send them through the Q&A feature, and we will address all the questions at the end of the talk. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Claire to begin.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's so great to be here. And I thank you all for just taking time out of your busy days to talk about money. It's typically the last thing that most people want to talk about, I realize. So I really am grateful to be here and to have you guys in attendance. So I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen when I get a chance to, and just talk a little bit about, who I am, give you some context, and okay, so let's try it again. Oh, perfect. Okay, so hopefully y'all can see my screen. So I do quite a bit of work with creatives and finance. I run a small accounting firm that I've had for a handful of years now. And so with that, most of the people that I work with are creatives, and the reason being is I think it's more than that, maybe about 9 years ago, my husband and I started a furniture design company called MFEO. And we've had our company for quite some time now, sort of went through all the ups and downs of building a creative business. These are just some of the products we've done over the years. And now we most recently focus on these Karvd walls to sell to folks as a design solution for smaller spaces. So the reason why I work with creative folks is because that is my tribe, and that's who I get along with. And I also understand that it's also not easy as creatives to necessarily switch our brains and start thinking about something so left brain focused, such as money. As a person who has the ability to split into both analytical and creative, I thought and realized over the course of time that my skills are best put to use in helping my fellow creative tribe and getting their numbers together. So like I said, I am a creative. I have a pretty extensive background in corporate media and finance. I left corporate media about 4.5 years ago to start my own accounting practice again, where I work primarily with small businesses and creatives, helping them get their accounting and help them run their financials and sort of just keep organized on that front. And then as a creative outlet, I perform burlesque sometimes. So, and that's just kind of like a fun, creative, soul-feeding activity that I just do sometimes. So the way that I like to dig in and approach how I talk about finance really is a little bit different than most people, because I recognize the fact that the majority of everybody, and this is regardless of how much money or how little money you may be making at any given point in time, every single person out there has something, has a challenge or a hang up about money, every single one of us. And in my experience of working directly with clients over the years, I have found that to very much be the case. And so I have to thank everyone once again for being here, because this isn't an easy topic. And especially at a time like now in 2020, when the level of uncertainty is so high, this just isn't an easy thing to talk about. So before I dig in fully, I always like to take just a quick moment to reset ourselves mentally, physically, because more often than not, when the subject of money approaches, there's just that, whatever that thing is that you feel inside, that anxiety, whether it's fear, whether it's shame, or whatever that is, it creeps up. And some days it might be better than, others, but it's always there. And so I like to do a little bit of an exercise, a breathing exercise, where it essentially takes us from this kind of like chaotic mental space to just being in one of peace, where we can just clear the slate a little bit, give ourselves room mentally to really think and be intentional with the topic at hand. So we're going to do this breathing exercise. I don't know if maybe some of you are potentially familiar with triangle breathing, but I would like for everyone on the call to just take a few seconds to settle into your space if you're not already settled in. Put your feet on the ground, hands in your lap, and just make sure that you've got all the kind of like twitches and little kinks out, and just be really aware of your physical space and your physical body. And once you're there, I invite everyone to please just close their eyes and just take a moment. Just breathe in easy, breathe out easy. And what we're going to do is I'm going to count us through a couple rounds of breaths. Again, just to reset us, just to take away any sort of anxiety or anything that we're thinking about before this, just to clear it all out. And so we're going to breathe in to my counts, and you'll just follow my instructions. So starting from the bottom, we're going to take our first deep breath to my count of 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we're going to hold it at the top. 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we're going to push it all out of our diaphragm at 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we're going to pull it all back in at 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold it one last time. 4, 3, 2, 1, and then push it all out of your diaphragm. 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll just keep our eyes closed for a few moments and just take a few easy breaths in and a few easy breaths out, taking note once again of our space. And when you're ready, slowly open your eyes. Okay. I always like to do this practice whenever I do any kind of money anything, especially when I know that it will personally bring me some level of anxiety. The breath is always a nice reset to just clear the space, clear our minds for just a moment, and give ourselves what we need. Okay, so using your breath as a tool for any kind of stressful thing as it relates to money, I highly encourage, and to do it as often as you need and for as long as you need, because maybe 2 rounds of breath sometimes simply isn't enough. And maybe 3 rounds of breaths simply isn't enough. And so I encourage you all to use that as a tool to help you, give you the space that you need. So the next part that I like to do, and this is all part of an initiative that I'm in the process of launching called Naked Finance. And really the idea is to kind of shift the way we think about money. And so the breathing exercise that we did is part of that, where we really do start from our breath, because the emotions that money brings each and every one of us will vary day to day. And so if we can use our breath as a tool to reset us first, you're already off to a good start. And so with that, I think it's really important as we think about this concept of money and dealing with it, really understanding what is our relationship to it. Because if you take a culmination of every single experience that you've had with money for as long as you've been around, that makes up this story. And what this narrative becomes is something that we tell ourselves about money that we may not necessarily realize that we carry within us. And the thing about that is that it affects the way that we deal with money, this narrative, this story that we have about money. And if you think about money as energy, right? You think about the act of receiving money and the act of releasing money. While it is all intended originally and historically to be transactional, what it becomes, because we are humans and because that is what society pushes us to, is it becomes energy. It just does. And we control the energy. We control the energy and the narrative in which we hold around money. And so as we go into this mindfulness about money, before we can even think about dealing with the tools and all of the things that we're supposed to do as we're told about money, like filing taxes, keeping the receipts, before we can even get to that point, it's always important to understand where we stand. Because it is by understanding what our feelings are about money, what our narratives are about money, what role money plays in our life, can we start to really begin to understand the best way that we're going to be able to deal with it, how we can start thinking about money intentionally in a way that is productive and not feel, this overwhelming sense of fear or shame. So I encourage everyone at some point, write down these questions and really dig deep. And I don't expect anyone to have to share anything necessarily, but I found out of my own personal experience, and when I've done this exercise myself, and it is something that I also continue to do over time, because situations are always changing, the world around us is always changing, and our feelings are always changing. And so it's always important to recognize, what is that? How am I feeling about money? How is it making me feel at this point in time? And how can I shift within that my narrative so that I can work better, I can be better, I can be in a better mindset, I can move into a space of abundance. And when I did this for myself, just on a personal level, it was very helpful, because what I realized was taking the culmination of experiences growing up and things I was told, that there were things I was ingraining within my own psyche that was like, well, maybe I don't feel I am worthy of certain things because that's all I heard growing up, you know, or maybe that was all I was exposed to. And the thing to also remember about this stuff is it's not maybe necessarily the easiest exercise to do, but it's helpful because it helps you understand yourself better. It helps you understand where you can make the changes to be more intentional with the way you handle money, with the way that you think about money. And it's not going to be easy for many of us because we might start to, in this process, uncover things, feelings, emotions that are just absolutely awful, absolutely painful, maybe things that we don't necessarily want to revisit. But it isn't until we address the elephants in the room within ourselves that we can again start to make that change, start to really look and think about money in a way that really intentionally works for us, that is coming from a place purely of self-love and self-care, which in 2020, I think we're all starting to find is really, really important. And then it's understanding, well, what is it about these feelings? What is it that triggers these feelings for us? You know, maybe it's dealing with a certain situation, or maybe it's something just as simple as, I really can't look at my bank account. Well, why is it that I can't look at my bank account? What is it that I'm scared of? Is it I'm scared because it makes me feel like I don't have enough? Is it because I'm afraid of losing it? You know, and that's, I'm not a therapist by any means. I'm only just walking through things that I've personally done for myself over the years to just continually reset my mindset about money so that it is intentional and it is coming from a place of love and care. And that's important. I mean, all of this stuff is important because while finance is a very tactical thing, the biggest piece that has been missing from the world of accounting and finance and money anything is that we aren't taught this in schools. We're not. And so it is left to our own devices to maybe have somebody that will help us, but maybe not. And then there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding about money. And there's a lot of, well, I know I have to submit my taxes. I know I need to file my taxes, and I know I'm supposed to do this. But then what's really missing is sort of like the internal understanding about it all, which is not a thing that's really ever talked about. And while I am not a money coach or a therapist, as I will say that again, you know, I think that if we can start by shifting the, yeah, I have to deal with money. Yeah, I have to deal with finances, but where do I sit with this? Where do I sit emotionally with all of this? Then we can start to deal and use the tools that are available to us in the best possible way. So I encourage everyone to, at some point, consider doing this, using the breathing exercise as you are doing this exercise, because it will help you understand how to begin shifting your own narrative around money, and how to start shifting, you know, what might be a scarcity mindset into one of more abundance. And I'll tell you what, I mean, and maybe many of you already realize this, but abundance isn't how much money you have in your bank account. And I think that 2020 will show us that very quickly, but that is a very, very hard thing to see and understand. Abundance comes from internal. It comes from within. And if we are going to find and see our own abundance, this is where we start, right? And we start here by understanding the whole breadth of what it is that we hold on to that literally do not serve us, that do not represent how we feel about money or represent our situation. But it's just those little things maybe, you know, or those big things that we keep here so deep in our minds, in our hearts, whatever, that we just need to figure out so that we can finally let go of it and make space for ourselves, better space, positive space. So the only way to move forward is just acknowledging what those hangups are, what those challenges are. And it's not easy, but may this be an invitation for all of you to start thinking about it a little bit differently, because emotions and finance is not a topic that are synonymous within each other when you start doing the research on finance. And it's always money mindset, and yeah, well, how do you change your money mindset? What most people don't talk about is that we have a whole history that we have to contend with within ourselves that we need to figure out first. And if we can figure that out first, then we can move forward and we can grow. So a little bit of another visualization exercise is when if we are to move into the space of really shifting our paradigm, it's not only through this acknowledgement and figuring out what those hangups are, but then it's also outward looking, right? It's a little bit of like goal setting, I guess. But where do you want to be emotionally? And it sounds silly maybe to some, but where do you want to be emotionally? Well, we all want to be happy. We all want to be joyous to some degree. What does that look like? And how can we get there? But really visualize it and be it, see it. I really do believe, in the power of visualization, something I've done inadvertently for most of my life before I even knew that visualization was a thing, but it is something that works if you really believe in it. And so first we start with the breath. Second, we start through, we follow it up with acknowledging what are these hangups and understanding like what these triggers are that put us in this place of discomfort, maybe fear, or whatever that word is for you that just isn't great. And then we visualize where we want to be, simply, but we want to be clear and we want to be specific. And this is where the work happens. It's acknowledging, it's visualizing. And as we go throughout time and make this shift, and for some, the timing is going to be different. Timing, it's individual to everybody. But what I encourage everyone to do and to have is an affirmation, because it serves as a little bit of a reminder that the way you might feel isn't forever, and the way that you feel isn't representative of who you are and what your reality is. You can change that. And so I use affirmations or mantras as a way to kind of just remind myself really quickly, I'm feeling super bummed out, or I'm about to do this thing that really stresses me out about money, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's going to be okay. Right? And so I have specific mantras, several that I would like to share. And maybe you guys already have some out there, but here are the ones I have used over the years that have really worked for me and really kind of helped me shift over years and years, from a mindset of scarcity more into and maintaining a mindset of abundance, because it is work. It is work. And this is the sort of exercise that isn't a one-time thing. Again, remember, as circumstances around us are changing, jobs are lost, jobs are gained, recessions are happening, economics, things are just going on all around us. This is constant work. And that's something that no one really ever talks about. But we have to start here. We have to start with ourselves before we can start with the tactics of money management as we are told, right? So my mantras, my favorite ones, the first one is, you are not your money. Regardless of how much money you might have in your bank account at any given time, you could have $1 million in your investment accounts one day, and then you could have 1,500 in your investment accounts another day. Or maybe it's literally just like your bank account. You might have, a couple $1,000s one day, and then 2 years from now, you might have 20,000 or 50,000 saved up. Who even knows? But what I'm getting to is that regardless of what that figure says within your online banking or your online statement that you're looking at any given time, that is not a representation of who you are. It's just not. And it's really, really difficult to remember that when we are being bombarded with messages all the time with social media and all of these, there's just an overload of information and content coming at us a million miles an hour. And so just remember, you are not your money. And it is in no way any representation of who you are as a person and what your value is to this world. The other one I love to use often, probably as often as possible, in fact, is that money comes and money goes. Money comes and money goes. Simple. And it seems so easy, but then I found that when I get into these moments where I have to pay off a large release, a large chunk of money for one reason or another, that I get that anxiety. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm like $5,000 like poorer than I was, 2 seconds ago. And then you kind of go through this spiral. But then I have to remind myself, money comes, money goes, money comes, money goes. This money will come back to me in some way. It will, it just will. And it might not be tomorrow, it might not be next week, but it will come back, and we have control over all of that. So you are more than welcome to borrow my money mantras or come up with something that really hits home for you, something that means something to you, that will just help you remember in a snap that you can change the course of where this is all going. You can change the course of how you think about money and find abundance with what you have within your own wealth of resources. Okay, so that was the right side brain part of the presentation. We're gonna now switch to the tactical, because that is very much what I do. So getting smart. Once you have done all of the right brain exercises, which again are so important if you're gonna be successful with the left brain work. Some people can do it, and for those folks, kudos, they probably don't need to be here. But for everyone else who feels a way about money at any given point in time, feels some sort of challenge in managing it, or just gets hung up and frustrated, I always encourage everyone to just go through some version of what we just did, the right brain exercises. So then that way we can move into the left brain management of money and be more intentional and be more successful and be more proactive versus reactive. So some of you may have heard of SMART goals, goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. It's kind of just it's a great thing I learned back in my days in corporate. But I found it to be really, really helpful over the course of time, just in terms of setting up systems and processes for myself that really work and are essentially processes and systems that I don't completely detest. And that's important, right? So here's the thing about managing money. It's just habitual. That's really it. It is just building a good habit. But building a good habit, while it seems easy, it takes a while and it requires a lot of patience, because you're probably going to go through, as you're kind of just getting to understand like what your system and what your process is, you'll come across a lot of things that just don't work. And when that happens, don't give up. Just don't give up, because all it means is that system, that person, whatever the thing was, that resource just isn't for you, and that's okay. And also know that there are a wealth of resources that are available, and it is literally just a matter of finding the right ones. So the first thing I like to start with in terms of just getting money organized is, how are you at managing your business stuff versus your personal stuff? Now, for those of you who manage some sort of like business entity or have like registered with the state the work that you do through an LLC or through a sole prop or through an S corp or whatever that entity might look like. Regardless, it's always so important to keep your business expenses completely separate from your personal. Now, I say this because when it comes to tax time, it means that when you're ready to work with your tax accountant, that your headache is a lot less than it would have been had you mixed everything, because that is hours and hours of work that you can save yourself, hours and hours and days of headaches that you can save yourself by simply just keeping things separate. And easy ways to do this, I would encourage you to open up a business account and start funneling all of your expenses and receiving money in a separate business account that is not your personal account, where you are buying groceries and whatever things you may or may not need for the house, right? That's the very baseline, easiest thing you can do, because the money is working in one place and the other money is working in another place, and there is no coexisting of funds where you're like having to go through statements and, again, just avoiding the pain and trauma of hours and hours of stress looking back at the last year or however long. And then I think it's also just about, what is your money management style? And be really, really honest with yourself. Like, do you feel more in control and better when you were in the weeds and you were looking at it, you know, you get on the habit, and when you have done that, does that feel better? Or does it feel better to work with somebody that can help you understand things, right? So that you are not, you're hands-on to a degree, but you have the resources of a person to help guide you through the process, right? And those people exist. There's many, many of them, which we'll go through in a little while. But it's understanding, like, where do you fall? You know, what are you willing to really do? And you have to be honest with yourself, because if you're like, well, I really like to be hands-on. So you've tried maybe a spreadsheet or two before to try to track everything in, but then somehow the spreadsheet doesn't work, you know? Like, what does that say? Is it the spreadsheet that doesn't work, or is it that you just don't really want to be hands-on? And the more specific you can get about what it is, again, that you are comfortable with and feel in control over, that's what you should do. And again, just keep patience that it might take time to figure that out. It might take many methods of different combinations of things to figure that out. And that's okay. It is perfectly okay. So all of this to say that this leads to just building a system that works for you. And there is no one easy answer to all of that for any single one person, because we're all different. We are all our own individual creatures, and we know how we work best, and we know how we work at our worst. And so it's being really, really intentional about and honest about what it is that you're willing to do and what it is that you're not. And it's okay if you're not willing to do certain things. So the bones of a really good system will always, it's just some manual things to remember. It'll give you a really good bigger picture of where you're at any given time. You know where your money is at generally, and you know what's coming in and what's going out, and it's great. This system will also keep you really accountable, you know, simply kind of tied into the first point. You know what's going on, and it requires that, you know at any given point what you have, and it's great. A good system also has few manual entry points, and this is something that a lot of people just don't really ever touch up on, but it does. You want to make this as easy as possible for yourself, because if this is already an uncomfortable topic for you potentially, then why not work smarter and not harder? Make the system work for you. If it means you automate it as much as possible in a way that also reduces the anxiety that you might feel around money, then you're in a good spot. You're finding things. And again, these tools totally exist. But then the other thing too to remember is that you have to be consistent. It is, as I said earlier, like building a habit. You have to build the habit. And, you know, ultimately, it's easier to build habits around tasks that you don't completely hate. It might be a little bit uncomfortable at first. It's never going to be a cakewalk. But if you can find the thing that's like, okay, this is okay. I'm feeling a little uncomfortable, but maybe the more you look at it, the better it gets. And then, you know, it starts to just give you the information you need. And you get to the point where your anxiety that you might have started with, you know, has reduced, then you know that that's a good system for you. And so if you can automate this system, if you can make it do the work for you, absolutely you should do that. And the awesome thing about being alive in 2020 is all of the apps and technology that we have that will do the work for us, and we can set it up however we want. It literally makes our lives easier. And again, I will share a handful of these tools in a little bit. Okay, digital tools. Mint.com is maybe the oldest one that I know of. And this is a full money management system. You can connect your bank feeds to it, and you can build budgets within it. It's quite robust. It has a mobile app. It's great. My con though with mint.com is that it sends a lot of notifications and you have to disable everything, almost to the point where it just seems a little bit too much. But if you're into that, great. If you're not, you just have to really go in and kind of just reset all of the notifications so that you're not getting spammed by Mint all the time, because it's probably not anything anyone wants. It's constant reminders of every single cent, unless that's what you want, which is totally fine too. Other newer apps that I have found, mobile apps specifically, Status Money is also another newer money management app. I've played around with it a little bit, but you can essentially build budgets similarly and set up goals similarly. In the very little use I've had with it so far, it's a very clean UI and it's not as clunky as mint.com, which for me, I prefer, especially from a personal finance standpoint. It's just better. Bright Money is probably my new absolute favorite app that I have ever used. I started using this a couple months ago, and what it does is if you have credit cards, it will, if you connect it to your bank account and your credit cards and whatever else, it will incrementally it'll read your credit cards and what your minimum balances are, and then it will incrementally take, you know, pennies to the dollar or whatever you allocate based on frequency. So this is an automation thing, and it will plug it into a little like pot of money. And by the time your credit card is due, it will make the payment for you like that. So basically you never miss your credit card payments, and it's always just making the minimum payments for you exactly on time. This for me has been game changing. It is a free app. I encourage all of you to do it so that you don't incur fees, because those credit card fees can be sky high, and then they raise your APR, and then you're just kind of like in a world of craziness and fees that you just never even spent actual money on that you've accrued. So Bright Money is a game-changing app that I love. I will be a spokesperson for them someday because it has been awesome. If saving money is an issue, not necessarily an issue, but something that you want to do, but you just don't really want to think about it, kind of going along the lines of this whole set it and forget it, Acorn and Digit are great, and I use them both for personal and business. I have it incrementally, I set the rate at which, how much I want to save over a period of time, whether it's $500 every quarter or whatever. You can set everything on your own. It will just take pennies to the dollar each day, each week. And the next thing you know, you have a pot of money. And so I started doing this just as recently as March. And what I was able to do as a result of being able to save up funds from both of those accounts was to completely pay off a credit card. And that was awesome. It was just like, holy moly, I've got enough to pay off this credit card, and I didn't even actively try. That's a system you want, because it's just working and you're not like constantly laboring or stressing out about every single penny, cent, and dollar. Other tools, just resources if you do want to understand the verbiage and the language around finance a little bit more. The Balance is a really, really great blog that explains everything in layman's terms. Investopedia is another one. Again, really, really great for folks who just want to know a little something about something, like what is equity and why do I care about it? Why should I care about my cash flow? Very basic things that are explained in a way that are attainable, easy, not overwhelming, because that's the thing with finance. Sometimes it can be so overwhelming and, they're just throwing all kinds of terms at you and you're just like, I literally don't know what you just talked about or told me. So thanks, I guess. So if you have the time or the patience or the interest, I, encourage you guys to just check those out. They're very easy blogs and they're great. And then for those of you who want to do a little bit more deeper investment or start looking into that, Ellevest is a great resource. They're specifically geared for women who are looking to financially invest, their money here and there in stocks, whatever, what have you. So they have a wealth of resources around that specifically. And Robinhood is another one, another really quick and easy way to, if you know what stocks or bonds or anything that you are interested in, maybe potentially investing a little bit of change, a little bit of extra money you might have laying around, Robinhood makes it very, very easy. And so a quick word about spreadsheets. I have to bring this up because I, very early on in my days as a youngin', started working with spreadsheets because that was the only tool I knew at the time. And while there is absolutely nothing wrong with spreadsheets, you have to remember that unless you're doing some really fancy formulas within these spreadsheets, that it will probably require you to manually update it in order to keep it working. Now, remember my point about manually updating things. Are you really going to do it? And if the answer is no, that's fine. But that's the thing about spreadsheets. You're constantly going in there. It is a living and breathing entity, kind of like a person or a pet, where you have to keep feeding it, because if you don't, then it's not alive anymore. So if you are insistent about using spreadsheets and that is where you are the most comfortable in, I encourage you to not just create a brand new spreadsheet out of nothing, in case that's something, but to use templates. There are templates out there that exist that potentially already do the thing that you are trying to figure out, and maybe to a degree also automate them. My favorite one that I've come across over the years is Tiller, where they have pre-built spreadsheets for budgets, for finance, that kind of just do the math for you, and all you're doing is just maybe plugging in one number and it just does the calculation for you, and it's great. Another tool that I didn't mention on this slide is Airtable. And that's not really necessarily finance based, but if you're spreadsheet crazy and you like the colors and all the craziness with spreadsheets, Airtable is also a really great place to start, although I don't believe they have any pre-built templates specific to finance, and I know that Tiller does. Okay, so people resources. If you are somebody who wants to work with a person, before I even delve into all of this, I think, and I encourage you all to work with somebody that you like and that you trust. More often than not, and I would say that maybe even 90%, this is my wild guess, but maybe 90% of the world has CPAs or tax accountants that were grandfathered in through another relationship, and that you've just stuck with that person because you didn't know any better, you didn't know that you could find someone who could be better. Well, guess what? We exist. People who really care, who are genuinely willing to listen and work with you to get you to a place where you are financially confident. And we come in all shapes, sizes, and forms. So there are accountants, right? The people who we normally refer to as our tax people. That's just generally what we know them as. There's also bookkeepers, folks who help you keep record of your finances. Then there's CPAs, certified public accountants, people who, similar to folks who are attorneys and have had to take, all kinds of tests. Similarly, this is the accountant version, where they have to regularly take tests to ensure that they are compliant and aware of the latest tax changes and tax laws. And then for those of you who just kind of want more mindset work, there's a ton of awesome personal finance coaches who can really help you kind of get to the nitty-gritty of the internal work that needs to be done. And if you need a personal finance coach, that's okay. I mean, these folks are here to help you really work through the mindset. It is some level of money therapy, and if you need it, we all need it to a degree, but I know some really, really great folks. Or if you're more of the mind of wanting to just invest for the longer term, whether it's stocks, bonds, and you don't have the time or the patience to DIY it by going into Robinhood or an Ellevest and then just making your own stock selections, find a financial planner who's awesome, who can help you look at the longer term picture of where you want to be as part of your visualization exercise, and understanding, based on what money you are making now, how can you get to that point? How can you get to that 10-year plan? Or how can you get to that 5-year plan? I am a money person, but working with financial planning is not my thing. I don't want to DIY it. So I personally work with a CFP, and it's great. She's awesome. We check in every quarter, and I just get a quick update on all of my stocks and anything I need to switch around if I needed to. And then for those who have a ton of assets that they might be sitting on at any given point, or have to deal with trusts or anything handed down to you, maybe through family or family friends, things like that, there are wealth managers to help you kind of optimize on all of your assets and things like that. Then there's a ton of workshops and webinars. Honestly, especially with everything that's going on now, I'm starting to see more and more of these pop up. And if it isn't my messaging or my tone or whatever that works for you, there's going to be someone out there who does really resonate with you. And it's, again, just simply a matter of finding them. And at the end of this call, I'm happy to share all of my resources, because it is not a one-size-fits-all, kind of scenario. There are people who are really, really well suited to work with us and put us in our best financial position, whatever that need might be. But the important thing is that you should find someone that you enjoy talking to. You should find someone that you trust. It shouldn't just be someone you've been grandfathered. Money is very personal, and it is, the result of our blood, our sweat, our tears. So when we have to deal with money and move it around in a way that maybe we don't completely understand, and doing things such as filing taxes or investing for the long term, it is so important that you find a relationship that will really support where you want to be going. So just a quick note about the difference between accountants and bookkeepers, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily know that difference. I actually didn't know that difference myself, so I want to just take a few minutes to clarify, especially for those of you who do want to find someone dedicated to helping you with whatever you might need. So accountants, and this is kind of a broad term, but accountants doesn't necessarily mean that they are a CPA. People who are accountants can file taxes, but people who are accountants can also do bookkeeping. In today's world with technology, the lines get a little bit blurred. Bookkeepers historically are just the people who keep your books, who look at the money you've spent, track it, and look at the money you've made, track that, and then they're able to come up with a financial statement, right? But that's it. There's not really any level of advisory so much historically with bookkeepers. It's just, we've managed your money. Here's a nice packet to hand to your CPA for filing taxes, and then that's it. So in today's world, you know, that's sort of the primary difference. But what I've found that, you know, happens now, especially with the, you know, advent of like so much awesome technology at our hands, is that the lines between accountants and bookkeepers start to get blurred, because technology really does allow us the ability to do more analytical type work, right? And so while the breadth of my work with clients falls under bookkeeping, I do, with my clients, offer financial, you know, advisory and strategy work just based on the financials and all of that. So I consider myself more of an accountant versus a bookkeeper. Okay, so budgets, and I'm going to try to get through this a little bit quickly so that we cover all bases, but budgets. So as you start to think about potentially setting up a budget for yourself, what does it mean? What does it look like? Well, it's really just setting aside a specific amount of money, right? That's it. And it's understanding, let's say, understanding your monthly budget. I mean, and this is very easy. Many of you probably already know this, but it's understanding, okay, well, month to month, how much do I need to live? How much do I need to survive based on my lifestyle? Is it, you know, is it rent? Is it my monthly rent or monthly mortgage? Is it, what are my expenses? How often am I going to the grocery store? What are my utility bills? What's my internet? It's just taking stock of what all of those things are and understanding at the end of it, what does that single number look like that represents how much you need to live? Or if it's saving up for, you know, a vacation, and you know generally how much you want to save, how much from that monthly budget can you start putting aside, you know, to save for your vacation budget, you know? And so it requires that you look at your money often enough, right? Consistently, and understanding how much you've made versus how much you planned for versus how much you've actually done, right? How much you've actually spent and how much you've actually earned. Because in that way, the difference will be telling as to how realistic the budget you've set up is, and you might need to adjust it, and that's okay. You know, maybe, you know, as creatives, I know that a lot of us have work that's maybe a little bit irregular. That's totally fine, and so we might need to adjust our budget accordingly. You know, we might need to understand what are our baseline expenses, you know, what are the nice to haves, and how can we set up a budget so that it really does help support sort of like an inconsistent flow of money that might be coming in and out. And so going back to this idea of automation, I'm a huge fan of just setting it up and forgetting it, working smarter. We're not working harder. I just want things to work in the background so that I can get on with the rest of my life. And so the best way to do this is to, at the very least, set up separate accounts for yourself, whether it's, you know, separate savings, separate tax savings, separate, you know, vacation money. I am the queen of like having 50 bank accounts because they all work. And I always know which pot of money to work from, and I don't have to think about it, versus having a single account or, you know, a single credit card for one thing and, you know, just kind of like mishmashing everything. It just is, Not everyone thinks that way. You know, that might be too much for folks, but for those of you that, you know, that could help, you know, just alleviate a little bit of like the stress of thinking too much or focusing too much on any one thing. I encourage you to try it out. You know, most checking accounts are free, relatively speaking, at any bank. So do it. And for, you know, also just setting aside money and savings, you know, the other thing I like to do is just set up like recurring transfers in between accounts. So again, I don't have to remember, okay, on the first of every month, I need to transfer like the X amount of money from like business rent to like our personal rent, right? I just have it set up where on the 15th of every month, you know, $500 gets deposited from my business account to my personal account to help pay for rent. Perfect, done. Don't have to think about it. You know, you just obviously want to make sure you have enough money in each of the accounts, but to set up recurring things like that, I promise will just make so much more space, mental space for you. Whatever those kind of shortcut, easy things are, you should do it, especially as it pertains to budgeting. Okay, so I know I kind of blew through this very, very quickly, but just to kind of summarize everything that I've covered today. So when we think about money, I think it's really, really important to start with the right brain-centric stuff, because at the end of the day, doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is, we all feel a way about money, and we're always going to feel a way about money, right? So this, by acknowledging sort of like our right brain first, you know, our creative, sort of more emotional, sort of sensitive side, we can figure out maybe what are the things that start to trigger us. What are the things that we are carrying inside of us that don't, you know, that we don't really need anymore. And by acknowledging it, we can start to really move past it and reframe how we think about money. Whether it's through the breathing exercise, a combination of using the mantras as often as you need, and or consistently just revisiting where you're at with money at any given time, because again, these are uncertain times. We don't know what's going to happen. Many of us don't. So we have to kind of just always recalibrate and revisit like what that means. And then keeping this in mind, it's looking outwards and going, okay, well, where do I want to be? How do I want to be? And here, and let's continue to use these tools, acknowledging and reframing and breathing and visualizing, just to get us there. Because if we can get there first, then it makes the road to dealing with money through the left brain, through logic, so much easier, because we're so much more honest with ourselves. And if we move into the left brain, then we can start to build this system that works, right? And it's not going to be something that happens overnight. You're going to probably go through a slew of tools and resources, whether it's digital or people resources, until you find the right fit. But that's okay, because this is your money. This is where you're putting your energy. This is what we're doing, you know, to live in this world. And so you should take that so seriously. Everyone that has anything to do with the money that you were making, the money that you were earning, the money that you were releasing into this world, all of that is sacred. It really, really is. And if you have any money relationships or financial relationships with anybody that just doesn't really serve you, that brings you, you know, contention or frustration or anger, just remember, you can find someone better. You can find someone better, and someone who really has your best interest at heart. That's what we all need. You know, and ultimately, as you do this more regularly, you know, you may start to uncover different resources, different people that really start to get you jazzed about the whole thing. And it's great. I mean, in the course of my own research and working in accounting and with clients, like, I get super stoked about finding resources that will make my life easier. And I'm always excited to share them with everyone because I'm like, you guys, it doesn't have to be this hard. There's so many things. There's so many things almost always. So just know that all it takes is a little bit of, Googling or just kind of being open to it, just a little bit of searching. And, and I'm also a resource as well. I'm always happy to just share whatever I can to help folks just get to a better place with this stuff, because now more than ever, we need it. We really, really need it. Okay, so the best ways to stay in touch, my email, my website, Instagram. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I am starting this new initiative called Naked Finance. And I covered really quickly a little bit of how I do it today, sort of just a condensed version, but I offer through it several types of workshops where it is half left brain and half right brained. And so the Naked Finance workshops happen on the first Friday of every single month. And that's really primarily just the narrative and the mindset and the reset, right? It's just an opportunity to kind of do the practice a little bit more in depth, because I think the whole world needs it. We're always just in need of having to reset the way we think about things. And so that's it. It's an hour for free, dedicated to just nurturing our right brain as it relates to money. And then the second thing I'm doing that's also free is just like an office hours that I'm going to start doing on social media. I'm kind of just testing out which platforms, but if you follow me on Instagram at Naked Finance, I'll be putting all of the information there, sharing everything. But basically, it's an opportunity to ask me any questions around taxes, finance, systems. Send me your questions ahead of time, and I will do my darndest to answer all of those questions in the hour that we have together. And if there are so many questions, I'll even consider opening it up to twice a month, because I know that these questions are just, I realized recently that I'm holding a wealth of information around kind of really tactical type things. And so I just want to make myself a resource to anyone who needs it, if they need it. And that's really about it, I guess. I don't know if we have time for questions because we're exactly at an hour. So
we do, Claire. We have a couple of questions that came in. So I'll go ahead and read them out to you and then you can answer. So I'll start with the first. I have difficulty pricing my services / products, and I tend to let others do that for me, which can result in selling myself short and or being underpaid. So I have trouble asking for money in situations when I have gone above and beyond the original arrangement. I am also not sure how to tell when the pay I'm offered for a gig is fixed or flexible. What do you recommend?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Pricing. Oh, such a hot topic. Okay. So it starts, I'm without getting like too deep. It starts with knowing what is your time worth? Seriously, what do you think your time is worth? And then if you look at like just the standard within your industry, because there is a standard in every industry, and then also you layer in your experience level, what is that standard? Where do you fall within that standard? And so if you don't know offhand what that answer is, how much your time is worth by the hour, then I encourage you to go through and figure that out. And you should stick to that, period. And then in terms of flexibility around getting jobs and kind of like, is this, what kind of job? Is this a fixed price, one fee for like an entire job, or is this an hourly rate? My best advice is, because we're all in specific certain industries, right? So we have a sense of how long it will take us to do a thing, whatever that thing might be. I always ask first in these negotiations, with potential client, what is their budget? This will give you a sense of kind of where they're at. And if they don't give you an answer, then that's fine too. But try as much as possible to let them give you the answer first, and then base your answer on that. Of course, I know it's probably also contingent on what the project is, but I imagine you're probably getting like projects, right? So it's not completely out of the box to just do a very rough estimate on the amount of hours that one project will take you. And then you probably want to add an additional 20% of your time to that to help determine if you were going to do a fixed rate, that determining what that price is. I hope that answered all the questions.
I think that was really great. I would also add one more thing, that once you know the value of your time and what you should be charging, and you add in your cushion for overage, make sure you have a really good contract as well, clearly stating what you're providing. Include a kill fee. So if for some reason you're booked to animate something and they decide that they don't want to do the project anymore, you're still getting some kind of fee for the work that you've put in. So include a kill fee or a cancel fee. And then if they need additional services above what's specified, perhaps you could list any additional services, the rate of what that would be, and what that would entail. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next question, which is, what would you say are some of the financial oversights that freelancers tend to most commonly miss or lose sight of?
So simply put, anything, and this sounds crazy, but you just got to trust me on it. Anything that you spend money on for your work, whether it's in research of, or in training and education of, or it is maybe meeting with potential clients, right? Or networking within your industry. Those are all business related activities, and any business related activity should be written off. That's the easiest way to put it. And I know that's super broad, but take, for example, you're going to, well, in-person meetings don't happen too often these days as much as they did before, but say you were going to an in-person meeting, and this in-person meeting is actually like an hour and a half away, right? Well, you are going to this meeting specific to work. You can claim those miles. And if you needed to gas up, you could gas up your car and write that off specifically because that was a business related meeting. And then say you get to this place, you have to pay for parking. You can write off the parking. And then you have maybe a meal or a cocktail or something with this potential client. Well, you can pay for that too, because again, you're not there for fun. You're there to try to generate business or develop relationships, professional relationships. So by that measure, those are things that you can write off. Again, if you aren't, if there's parts of maybe that trip that necessarily weren't business related only, then you probably shouldn't write that off. But I would say, as a rule of thumb, any activity, again, that hits and affects your business, whether it is the production of your work, the development of your business and relationships, or the training that you require, or maybe, training that your contractors require, for certifications or something, and you're willing to cover that expense, those are all expenses that can absolutely be written off. I would say that if you were to do, and I have a client who is a songwriter, music producer, he goes on inspiration trips all the time. I mean, maybe less now, but he was going on inspiration trips. And so while I'm not encouraging you to hop on a plane to Bali and write the whole thing off by any means, it has to be a very clear and legitimate business trip, right? And it is possible as creatives, we do a lot of things for inspiration and to kind of just help us you know, recalibrate, reset, do our best work, whatever. So, you know, just take caution in how you decide to write these things off. The next kind of complicated part is that working with an accountant kind of varies, right? Because on the spectrum of conservative to liberal accountants, and I'm not talking politics, I'm talking in terms of just the way in which they submit taxes, you're going to get a whole span. So I encourage you to work with somebody who really knows your industry, who's really familiar with the creative sphere. Because if you're working with somebody who just doesn't do taxes for creatives, then more often than not, you come to them with these research and development, you know, expenses that you need to write off, or these training and well, maybe not training and education, but these meals and entertainment. They're like, well, why are you writing all this stuff off? And if they don't understand the nature of your work, then they will not give you or submit the best tax filing for you. So just keep that in mind.
All right, and the next question is, do you have any tips for software or apps for managing multiple businesses? Some are nonprofit, others are, or could be LLC, etc.
So for managing finances, I have a couple. So the one that I use probably the most often is called Xero, and that's spelled Xero. They are neck and neck with QuickBooks. Everybody knows QuickBooks. And I personally don't love QuickBooks because at the end of the day, while QuickBooks was a wonderful solution for accountants and financial folks in the 80s or whenever it was first launched, it was designed specifically for accountants. So as a small business owner, as a creative, as anybody else who is not an accountant by trade, you have to figure out how to use it based on the way that accountants use it. And that's why so many people run into walls with using QuickBooks. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible to figure out how to use QuickBooks. It is. I know a lot of people who have, and that's awesome. But for the folks who have just like gone, well, QuickBooks is terrible and I don't really know what else to do. Xero is a great alternative to QuickBooks, and they really do design it with the small business owner in mind. It does all of the same functions, but intuitively, if you were to click around a little bit, you could probably figure it out a little bit faster, I think, than you would QuickBooks Online. Another one, and that I like to work with secondarily, especially for service-based business, and you have a relatively straightforward business model, like you're just invoicing people and they send you money and maybe you've got some expenses, FreshBooks is actually really, really great. They're easy, and their invoicing software is super top-notch. You know, you can run payments through the system as you would for Xero and even QuickBooks, but they make it very, very easy to understand and very simple. So if you are a service-based creative or provider, FreshBooks is an awesome, awesome alternative. In terms of nonprofits, so I know that Xero does have a nonprofit version of their software. I'm pretty sure QuickBooks probably does too. I've never used it. But I would say Xero is probably a good one, and they also offer discounts to nonprofits for their monthly fees and stuff. So definitely look into that.
Okay, so the next question, it's more of a tax question. So Claire, feel free to answer this if you want to, because I'm not quite sure if your expertise also falls really deeply into tax, but I'll go ahead and throw it at you and then I'll leave it up to you. So if you went to a place for a film project that is research and scouting, and you have a few meetings with people, and or you take your family, can you write off all of those expenses?
Great question. I would write off the travel to get there for you. And maybe, let's say you got a hotel room where you and your family are staying in. Fine, great. any meetings you have specifically with anyone on the ground to, you know, the scouting and the researching, if you do have meetings at all. But I would say that for meals, probably not. If you're covering meals for an entire family, it's like, well, why are these meals on? I would just not. I just keep it really black and white. Like, this meal, even though it's a business trip, it is a business trip, but then you also have some level of personal. And because you have some level of personal, or you are, you know, covering the meals and expenses for your family while you're on this trip, I would probably just stay away from expensing those meals. That makes sense. But if it's the hotel, you would need a hotel anyways, right? For yourself if you were going alone. So you could expense that. Your travel to get to the place, yes, you can expense that. Travel for your family to get to the place, no, definitely not. So it's kind of like a gray answer, but hopefully that sort of helps guide what is okay and what isn't within that specific scenario.
So we actually had, a couple of years ago, we had somebody do a presentation on taxes for us. And they, if I'm remembering correctly, they had said that 50% of the day of your travel should be geared towards work to be able to try and expense some of it. And you should be able to prove either via documentation or keeping notes in a calendar or a diary, what you did for half of that day that was work related. But with that said, with anything dealing with taxes, it really is best to consult a tax professional. And we can actually, come January, we can actually book a tax person to come do another talk for us. We've done actually a couple of them in the past, and it's always really helpful just to hear what they have to say about how you can write off things and avoid audits, or if you do get audited, you know, how to best handle those things. So that's actually all that we have. Let me double check, make sure we don't have anything else in the questions. So yeah, that's all that we have in the questions. So I just want to go ahead and wrap up. And Claire, I want to thank you so much for your time. And I just also want to say, oh, I'll start my camera so you guys can see me talking while we wrap up. I also just want to say, I really appreciate your holistic approach to financial management. And when I heard you speak a while ago, I think it was like back in like last October, I really appreciated your money mantra, that money comes and money goes, and that it's just kind of a cycle and a part of life. And, you know, we might be paying something large now, but it'll come back to us eventually at some other time. And I just want to share one other thing that I do with people for savings is out of my paychecks. I actually have, before my paychecks get deposited to my checking account, I have a certain amount out of each paycheck diverted into savings. So I literally don't even have to think about the savings. It just automatically happens. Yeah. And I get used to living on the smaller amount for my yeah. So just one of my little tips in addition to everything that Claire has shared with us. So just once again, thank you so much for your time and spending your afternoon with us. And for all of the attendees, I actually have a survey I'm going to send to everybody in the chat right now. So if you could please just take a few minutes and do our survey. It's how we assess the professional development talks that we present to all of you. And it gives us feedback too on where we can improve or where we're doing well. And we like most of what we do to be community driven. So we really want your input on everything we're doing. So thank you so much. And I hope everybody, you all have a lovely rest of your afternoon.